teach your children well. Their father's help did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams.
Now, anybody have questions?
Yeah, do you know how Sugar voted?
He voted yes.
Yeah.
He voted to confirm. Hildebrand didn't. He voted yes, and I'm actually, yeah, don't get me started on that. He voted yes, I'm happy to tell you, so that you can vote not to put him back in office.
I'd just like to make a comment. It's my fourth, I think, opt-out meeting, and I'm really struck each time with the real professionalism and calm of these people. I mean, they're talking about some really horrific things being done to children, but yet there's this methodical, take it at the core and work. I really need to be role models because I want to take somebody by the neck when I get this story. So I want to thank you for the real professionalism and seriousness.
Trust me, I have my moments.
Me too.
Yeah, if we hold it together in public, that's a good.
Yeah, my question is, I called up like a couple of teachers because I wanted up there my 4th and 5th graders were actually getting like mock practice tests. The ELA, I think my boys are opting out, I don't want them involved with anything. So I got one teacher claiming said they're not doing any kind of practice test. The other one kind of skirted around the issue, but basically it wasn't going to be a test. But my question was, and I'd like to know if you had anything, I want to know, they said that the principal is supposed to get guidance on what kind of policy or procedures they're going to do on the day of the testing, now that it's on time. And I would like to know, do you have anything planned? Like I told the 4th grade teacher, I said, should I let Tommy come in with War and Peace? Because I don't know how long he's going to be sitting there and read. So,
That would be appropriate preparation for the New York State ELA
And
regions.
the Iliad and the Odyssey.
yeah, so my question is, do you know of anything, I would trust your answers, well, as administrators, do you have anything, is that on your own, or is there actually?
Well, the state has provided some guidance, and some of the specifics are left up to the individual school district. As I said, the state has also told us to put aside the standard amount that we had last year for these state exams. For the kids that continue to be taking the test in some way, actively involved and still working on the exam, after that 90-minute period of time, like for example, we have a special testing period that the kids will come in the morning for that 90 minutes. And the kids that finish within that 90-minute period then will go to a shortened period day for the remainder of the day. For the kids that continue to work, well, they'll be brought to an alternate location and provided with the opportunity to continue working on the test. As was mentioned, you then provide a lunch break for those kids. And then you have to have somebody monitor those kids and make sure they're not actually talking about the test. If they discuss the test, then the test is over for them. So it's really going to be a difficult thing for us to be able to say effectively monitor and make sure kids aren't talking about a test they just spent 3 hours taking with their peers. But for the kids that continue, they can have the entire school day, which is actually a clarification that they recently provided to us, because we weren't sure how long untimed was. Was it more than 1 day? Is it 2 days, 3 days? They just didn't tell us. Recently, they just told us it's for the entire school day. So that if the kids, most kids would finish within 90 minutes, hopefully finish in 90 minutes, kids could spend the entire school day taking that exam.
Yeah, I just wanted to extrapolate in a different way and then add to what was just said. There really is no book on this. This is the first time that it's being presented to us, and I think each individual district will try to work this out to the best of its ability. But the bottom line is, you've been sitting here for what, 2 hours and 50 minutes? I don't know about you, but you're probably itchy and scratchy after like the first hour and 15, hour and 20. To think that we have some of our kids who are in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 8th grade sitting for that prolonged period of time for what is crazy, which leads me to the second part I want to talk about real quick. Stephen Cohen, who's the superintendent in Shoreham Wading River, who unfortunately is retiring, and I'm still clinically depressed over hearing that. talks about the hypocrisy, and I think this will land on some of you, hopefully it will resonate with you. Think about this. Go back to a year and a half ago. You had a commissioner who was John King, who sent his child to, or children to private school, which is fine, it's his prerogative. President of the United States, same thing. Chancellor, grandchildren, private school. All these people who are making these decisions are sending their children to have a totally different educational experience than what our kids are having. Whether it's in this great community that's high performing, or in my school district where it's moderately performing according to the state. They're making decisions for their kids where they're not taking state assessments that are freaking 8 hours long, right? That are attached to teachers. They're doing something totally, totally different. And they want that experience for them, yet for us, regardless if it's here or somewhere else in a public school, it is totally different. And you need to understand that. Think of your grandparents' education when they were in school. The one thing we all have in common is that we went to school at some point, right? Whether it was a private school, public school, whatever it is. But it's one thing that we went through for 13 years that we have this shared experience, good, bad, or indifferent. Grandparents, my grandparents, I can tell you right now, weren't tested to death. And they say that was like the greatest generation, right? And then I have my parents who were in school, they weren't tested to death. I wasn't tested to death in the 80s. I tried to repress the 80s, but I wasn't tested to death in the 80s. And you look at where we are now, it is so completely different. Yet, the decision makers want something that's totally different from their kids and our kids. That, to me, should piss you off. That should piss you off, as far as I'm concerned.
I just want to add very quickly, not to cut you off, but bravo, but when you, two things. First of all, we all know children, the high achievers, who will sit for hours in that quest for that 4. The ones that, the kids that don't like to come home with that 85 or that 88. And then the kids with the learning disabilities who will also sit there for hours to prove that they're not stupid. And completely aside, I have a friend whose child is applying to MIT. And I've been seeing a little bit of this as well. Colleges are actually getting away from ACTs and SATs. So what does that tell you? Colleges don't even want to know how your kids are doing on standardized tests. MIT's application asks children, what did you do that was different? Don't tell me about your grades. Tell us what you did that was different. That's on their application. So when they talk about college and career ready, even our colleges are not looking for this. This is not what our colleges are looking for. Our colleges are looking for exceptional children. We have exceptional children, and we don't need a test to tell us that.
And I want to add one quick thing to the concept of the unlimited time and what's going to happen with the protocol is I've actually put in a request to my district that they did in the past only allow the students that were not taking the test, the refusal students, to just read a book. And I put in a request, and I requested that they open it up and allow these kids to do some other written work, like word searches or, some kind of drawing or coloring or whatever. Because, you're talking about 8-year-olds. And I said that if the class, yes, they'll take, if it goes on for an extended period, there's only a couple of kids that are extended their time, then they'll remove them and take all the refusal kids, put them back in the room. But there's a good chance that most of the class would still be working past the, the 90 minutes or whatever. And then I don't want my child sitting in the refusal room in the cafeteria reading a book for that long. To me, it's too long to read independently for a kid that young. So that's something you can do, is put in a request to your school to let them do some more other things. Sorry, Frank.
I've been teaching 30 years elementary schools, and you guys are right to put emphasis on the problems with the state tests, but I want to make sure you also throw in what's happening in our classrooms on a day-to-day basis. Because the APPR requires all kinds of local assessments, we are doing, and it's hard to, I'm teaching 30 years, what I've seen in the last 4 and 5 is extraordinary. My hair's on fire extraordinary, because the testing we have to do for things besides the state test in order to establish baselines for local assessment of teachers as well is a whole nother pile on top. I'm a computer teacher. I test kids, kindergarten kids, as you guys have mentioned, who've peed on chairs. I tested those kids 5 weeks into their school career. We test 19 weeks out of 40. In a high-performing district like mine, where they spend so much on the resources for technology and otherwise, we are using half of our school year just for the testing. Not only the state tests, I'm just throwing that part
And
out as well.
can I speak to that too? Because I
Please.
teach a course that's not a state-driven course. I teach a social science research course. And it's a course that I piloted and do for the district. So what happened was the first several years I had that course, I ran it how I wanted. I have kids 5 years in a row. I pick them up in 8th grade and they stay with me till 12th grade working on research. It's a phenomenal program. I think it's one of the best programs nationally. But the problem is now when APPR is ushered in, and because I'm not judged by the state and I have to give a SLO, I had to stop what I was doing, and the first 2 days of the year, I have to give that baseline test. Now this is college level research. So the first year I gave it to my 8th graders because they were my accountability group. And I had a young man sit there, wanted to get 100 on this baseline test, after I told the kids 6,000 times, this is not going to go in the grade book, don't worry about it, let's just take it and get it over with. And he sat there for 42 minutes, and the test was only 15 questions long. He sat there for 42 minutes, and I noticed something was wrong, and I didn't know him well. He was doing this. And I'm looking at him, and I said, oh, God, he's pulling his hair out over a baseline test. So finally, I let him take it for another 5 minutes, and I walked over and I said, we're done. This isn't going to count against you. Please don't. And it was bad. And at the end of the year, he unfortunately, things happened, and he had to leave school. And they actually wanted me to give him the final. And I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to give him the final. They wanted me to give another young lady a final who had major heart surgery. And they wanted me to send it home. I'm not doing that. And I was willing to take a hit on my APPR for that. So the fact of the matter is, when we talk about the air in a classroom and the decisions that we have to make now, there are some teachers that's your job. I pay the mortgage in my house. My husband's retired. I pay my mortgage. So it's changed the whole job. And I work in Disneyland. I work in a great place. I couldn't ask for a better board, great local administrators, my building administrators, but it changes the air of the room, and it changes the air of the building. So, God willing, we'll get it all done.
Yeah, I think it's important also to note that there's very much a two-tier system now for evaluation for those who teach English and math and other subjects. And it really puts a great disservice on elementary school teachers as well as who teach in grades 6 through 8, the ELA and math classes. Because they're bound, which is historically, they're bound to those state exams, which we already talked about how we're purposefully failing a disproportionate number of kids, totally failing kids. And then you're talking about the SLOs. Now, the SLOs, where you're talking about, say, a local, where you say, okay, well, you give a pre-test and a post-test. So let's say you're in an art class or a music class. What's your pre-test? So what, you're going to give the final exam of art on the first or second day of the art class, and then you go and say, okay, well now, let me give you now, or music class, I want you to play the final piece that I expected you to play at the end of the year, where you know the kids haven't learned the piece at all, and so they're going to get purposely an extremely low score, and at the end of the year, now you've had the whole year of instruction, you'll get a high score. Now, that's the exam, let's say, in a music class. How does that compare to an ELA or math teacher who's taken that untowardly skewed, curved, purposely failing a large number of kids' exam and giving them a score? So you have, in effect, a two-tier system among teachers. I have to tell you, I think it's incredible if we want to try to get people who are going to be math and ELA teachers. That's not the kind of system where you're going to attract the best people, where you're disproportionately failing 70% of the kids and 30+% of the kids in high-achieving districts. Compare them to a system where you have these artificial SLOs and the others. Then what they're doing in some districts is saying, okay, we realize that it's meaningless, because it is meaningless, to give those crazy slows in ELA, in music or in art and all those other subjects. So what they're doing is they're coming up with an outside independent measure, such as graduation rates in high school. Right? And so we're going to count the graduation rate in high school for everybody, because we're all working toward that high school graduation rate. So now you're talking about accountability. You have, let's say, a third grade teacher, let's say, who's not doing their job really well. And now a proportion of their score is based on the high school graduation rate, which will artificially raise their score. Even though they may not be as effective as you want to say as a third grade person working with their own kids. Now this shows you the insanity of what a state system, what politicians have put in place. They are making teachers less accountable for their own children in their own class if they're not doing what they should be doing in the classroom. So you have a two-tier system that's unfair to ELA and math teachers, and it's also crazy in terms of accountability for everybody else.
And you have a 7th grader, for instance, my son, who, if I had let him take the benchmarks, he would have, on the second day of his first year in middle school, so it's a new school, big school with all older kids, you know, he's nervous, he's, doesn't know the way the school works with all these different classes, and on the second day of school, if he took those, he would have sat for 7 or 8 exams that lasted, for some of them, almost the whole period. And he was going to fail all of them because that's how they're designed. The French test, he's never taken French, was in French. And now again, and that's the thing, and we say, oh, this is crazy, and it's very laughable, but at the same time, what does that do for a new 7th grader that's already all shook up and nervous about starting middle school, and even though the teacher says, don't worry about it, it's fine, you got this kid failing every single test in every single class on the second day of school. What does that do for that kid starting off?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't participate, and I opted out of the slows when I could. But what do we do about the final exam? In a lot of classes, the final exam is the slow, is the APPR test. So are we supposed to opt out of the final?
No, you have to judge it based on, what I always do is I say, how does this count? What does it count for? Is it part of my kid's grade? In elementary school, when they're giving slows, and some of the schools, to try to stop parents from opting out of the benchmarks or slows in elementary school, they say, well, we're going to be grading it. And I'm like, it's an elementary school grade, what are you talking about? Like, it gets whatever the grade, it's a meaningless grade in elementary school. So I'm like, okay, fine. But when you're talking about middle school now it's on the report card, now it's part of a cumulative grade, and it means a lot more. So you have to judge. Now, it will not be part of an APPR score. I think the benchmarks in the fall are much more egregious, at least at the end of the year for a final. It's an actual teacher-created test to see what they learned throughout the year. A lot more legit than giving that same final the second day of school. So, that's the biggest difference, is that, this is not, and again, it's the teacher creates the final, and they decide on exactly, and they judge it
the
based
scores
on.
back.
Yeah.
And you get the scores back right
Yeah.
away. That's the beauty of, especially as they get older in the middle school and the high school, you get those scores back. So now you can say, okay, well, this is where this kid was weak. You hope that that teacher shares it with the next teacher, or this is where the kid was strong, and perhaps you use them for, I know sometimes placement.
And it can't be used in this insane APPR system if you don't take the benchmark in the fall. So if you only have your kid take it in the spring, it now negates it from being able to be used because you don't have it as a gross score, now it's just one score. So already you got that part down, where okay, we're gonna remove our kid from this insane system, and again, then he only is taking that spring final, which is a legitimate, look at what they learned.
Well, I actually am having a dilemma right now because I have a 4th grader who has learning disability, and then I have an 8th grader who's actually a very good student. Opted them out. This year my daughter's in 8th grade, she's taking algebra, and I saw that algebra regents last year. My husband, who has an MBA in finance, couldn't do the questions that the teacher was showing. Our neighbor, who also has an MBA in finance and was a math major at Penn, had no idea where to even start. And here I have an 8th grader. I spoke to the principal. I said, my kids did not take the ALA or math last year or the year before. I don't want, you know, this Regents, Common Core Regents is ridiculous. He's like, Mrs. K, if she doesn't take the Regents, she doesn't graduate.
There's no
Cannot
opting
now.
out of Regents.
Right.
I will tell you, however,
So,
that,
but, well, my point is now I feel like, you know, I don't know, I'm very frustrated because here we've got this common, you know, these horrible curriculum, and I feel like my daughter now is at a disadvantage because she hasn't been taking, you know, she hasn't taken the tests where everybody else in her
the
algebra
Regents
class did.
doesn't look like the, no, they don't look anything
It's not,
alike.
yeah, I mean, and she will be taking practice tests all through her, you know, that she will not be at any more disadvantage than any kid that took
Everybody's on
the
the same plan.
3 through 8 tests. But that's part of what we're trying to change, is saying that, you know, all of this has to change. And unfortunately, we have a group of kids now where this was their school career, and this has been ruined for them. I always say, my younger one, he's in 4th grade, this is all he's known. He's learned all by modules. Every single day of his career in school has been math modules. That is the most horrible way to learn math. And he hates math, he thinks he's a
No, I
terrible
mean, my
math
son
student.
has a language-based learning
Yeah.
disability, and I feel like this
Yeah.
curriculum really hits
Yeah.
him where he's weak.
And you know what?
And honestly, he's never had a teacher that
Yeah.
doesn't love him. He all he wants
Yeah.
to do is achieve, and it's,
So I can't
I'm
even,
so frustrated
and I
because I feel
can't
like we're
even
getting
tell you,
nowhere.
I can't tell you that, you know, all our kids are gonna be fine, we'll eventually fix it. And honestly, for my kids, I'm not fixing this anymore for my kids. And when I really started to realize that, it was extremely depressing. You know,
I'm
that,
petrified, I'm
well,
petrified.
that we're doing all this
I'm
work
petrified.
and we're fixing it, but we're fixing it,
Yes.
you know, for
But-
the future.
It comes with like I said, when you know you're a moral and an ethical person, and you know that the things that are happening are not right for kids, and there's grown-ups in charge of doing this to our children, I feel we have an obligation to protect them, because we know the truth. And so, to me, like Jeanette said, my son's dealt with this since 3rd grade. It's not gonna go away, I don't feel, within the confines of him being in school, and he has a learning disability. And it's depressing when you sit down and say, okay, this isn't going away slowly. This is why we're hopeful with what Todd Kaminsky is doing. It's actually given me hope. I haven't had it for years and years. I have hope now. But I don't know if that's gonna happen in the confines of the next year or two. We just have to keep pushing away.
I will say I declined the 3rd take of the global and the living environment in January. And I'm sitting between a rock and a hard place because she has agreed to be the first child in the state of New York to refuse Regents exam. She has agreed to do that. And I've spoken to her about that. And we did decline. She was supposed to take them for a 3rd time. Statistically speaking, as educators, we all know, a child can take a test a 2nd time, and their score might rise that 2nd time, but upon the 3rd take of a test, that score is falling. I know children that have taken Regents exams 6, 7, 8. I testified in front of the Suffolk County Assembly, the Republicans, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. You know, Al Graff, big fan, of, eliminating Common Core, but unable to help us. A parent actually testified that their child had taken Regents 22 times. I'm not doing that to my kid. I refuse to do that to my kid. And, and I'm not faulting that parent because I sit here and I'm a little afraid because I'm like, what am I going to do? And she is taking, as per her grade, she will take at the end of this school year, the New York State ELA and the U.S. History for the first time. Do I think she'll pass them? In my heart of hearts, not really, but she'll take them because this way I can go to New York State and say, she took them. Are you happy now? Can we separate it now? But I'm afraid. I am afraid.
I just want to make a point that, I don't know if many people realize the point that
Mrs. K.
what you're making too is, you mentioned that your 8th grader was taking a Regents exam. And many school districts on Long Island accelerate all kids in grade 8. And I have to tell you that that's part of this testing.
So she's AP.
Okay,
So is my son.
mentality. Many people don't realize that that's a violation of state regulation when you accelerate an entire grade. Because the regulation actually calls for accelerating kids who are able to be successful in a high school level class while they're in middle school. So if you're accelerating every single child in that grade, by definition, you're violating that regulation.
It's voluntary.
Okay, I'm just saying that many schools.
A
I'm aware
lot
that
of schools
do
have
that.
changed now, and they are doing mass acceleration the entire grade.
That's right.
Except the
So
grade
make a-
topics from junior year down to now what an eighth grader is.
Yeah.
Well,
But I
that's
think
not
that
ours, I don't
many
think.
people don't realize that the research, though, is very clear, and actually Nassau BOCES has recently been looking at the impact of accelerating entire grades. And what they found is that it hurts kids who, historically had difficulty in those grades, particularly special needs kids, and the kids who would get, let's say, a level 1 or a low level 2. It's about 15% of the class. And those kids automatically then they typically fail the Regents exam in grade 8, and then they become tracked in grade 9. And so without question, it hurts those lower achieving kids, as opposed to having an open admissions policy for those Regents exams in grade 8. So I want to just make it clear that that's very evident, but many districts have increasingly moved toward that, which ultimately does hurt kids because, again, of this testing, high achieving mentality that's going on across Long Island.
We have that they accelerate the majority, and there may be about 20 kids that aren't. And those 20 kids are exactly where they should be, taking an 8th grade course. But if you ask the majority of them how they feel stupid. It all becomes internalized messages, negative internalized messages, because they're feeling that they are lower than everyone else when they are exactly where they should be.
I think this lady,
My daughter gets extra math and reading help. She doesn't have an IEP. But how much should I worry if I opt her out, that she doesn't have that statistic that will help qualify her for next year?
Has absolutely nothing to do with special education. They are not allowed,
She's not.
but they're not allowed to determine services based on New York State testing.
No, services can't be taken away or forced or anything based on state test scores. It can't be, by law now, it cannot be the sole determining factor for any place. So if you opt out, your services cannot be changed. They can't say, oh, you opted out, so now we're gonna pull your extra help from that. They can't say that by law.
This is a broad question, I don't want anybody to take offense who's up there doing their hard work, but with all the pieces that are talked about, especially kids staying longer, isn't there just a way that everybody can breathe and just say quietly, tap them on the shoulder and take the test? Take it away from them.
Yeah, but you're gonna have parents
What's that?
you're gonna have parents in every district, and I know parents like this, where if the school district said, listen, enough is enough, when they see this kid stressed out and they take the test, the parent will be upset if they hear that the kid wasn't allowed to spend all day doing this test.
Well, then you let their kids sit there, and not the other 97%. I don't know, I'm just saying.
No, I'm saying
It's
for
a
the,
logistical nightmare.
for the extended time I'm talking about,
Yeah,
so,
that's what I was talking about too, but
yeah.
I guess the thing I just want to leave, and I don't need anybody to answer it, but I just want to get it out into the air, is the parents now are opting out. The professional organizations, are they working with their staffs, and with their colleagues as teachers and colleagues as administrators to figure out ways that they can also get the system down to where it's not so terrible the way it is now, where it's not so harmful to children? I know, is it Keith? You mentioned that there was a regulation on the acceleration of 8th grade students. The regulation is broken, but nobody does anything about it. The state isn't enforcing it. So I'm wondering how many other regulations are being followed.
This is the first time that I was just gonna say,
Yeah, no,
send me
no, I'm
that.
saying that. I've been studying all the
Yeah,
regulations
to
that
get
are
on
already
that
broken,
too.
then why should we be following the regulations that are harmful to children? It's just a
Right.
question that don't need an answer, something to ponder as we move forward, that's all.
Yeah.
Can I just, there's like a population that's not really being addressed here, because I don't know if it's pertinent in like the East Williston. I know Mineola's on the rise, but we're talking about our L population. And what everybody needs to understand is that when you have children that are coming into a school district, 1 year and 1 day, they are required to take the ELA exam. And regardless of entry into country, they have to take the math exam the year that they are enrolled in school. But on top of that, they also have to take an additional assessment called the NICESLAT exam, which is a 4-day exam that incorporates speaking, reading, listening, and writing. And this determines their language proficiency on the new progressions on ENL. So what I'm going to say is if you have parents or you know people that have children that they are just coming in, you need to advocate for them as well, because their voices are usually the unheard people, and their children are really being like taken advantage of by the state, because you cannot refuse the NYSESLAT exam because it determines where you are in your ESL journey towards mastery of the language. So these poor kids have to take NYSESLAT, ELA, and math all within a month's time. So we proctor ELA April 5th for 3 days. They come back, they get proctored for math for 3 days, and in between, we have already started assessing that speaking component, which you have to speak to every ESL student one-to-one and assess them on their linguistic abilities. And then, once the ELA and math are done, then they come back for reading, writing, and listening. So these poor kids are tested to the umpteenth level.
Well, a
So
lot
we
of
have to
times their
advocate for them
parents, I
as
think,
well.
are afraid. Their parents are afraid to buck the systems.
Yes.
Because they think that, because of wherever it is that they're coming from, that the government's gonna, there'll be repercussions. So because of the society, the socioeconomic
Right,
issues associated with that population, you see a lot of parents that are fearful.
right, so we need to educate
True.
and advocate.
Yeah, and maybe we can wrap up with this one. I'm thinking, first of all, where I'm from, in Patchogue, Medford, we had 50% free and reduced lunch, and we have a large population of what you're talking about. So I think we have two sets of students that aren't even behind the 8 ball, because there's no 8 ball to be behind, right? You have our students who are classified, who have disabilities. Clearly, it's insane. But this is the second one, so, it really depends on the school district, depends on the outreach. For us, it's about, reaching out to those family groups that are out there. It's just so important, because administrators need to be educated on how to produce that type of outreach. And some are reluctant to do so, but I couldn't agree with you more. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh.